Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison from MoeGamer.net and the other garbage that's on this YouTube channel. It's not garbage, is it? It's wonderful. I should be pimping myself a bit more. And I'm joined once again by my good friend Chris Kasky. How are you doing, Chris?
Good, Pete. How are you today?
Yeah, not too bad. You're fresh from another evening of horror movies, I believe.
Yeah, it was a Stephen King night at the drive-in last night. It was Tales from the Dark Side, which is a great short story horror film. Like, I love horror films like that, where it's like 3 mini horror films. Mm-hmm. and Sleepwalkers. Both films seem to have been unified by murderous cats in some way, in some way or another.
Is there any other kind of cat?
I don't think so. They're all beautiful murder machines in one way or another. But yeah, it was good. It was a good time, and the nice, cool fall weather made it particularly nice because the windshields weren't fogging up for a change. So yeah, it was a good evening. But I'm tired as usual.
I can make a comment about what you're getting up to into your car, but yeah, I'll
just being fat and it's humid. There's no fun things going on in the car.
I feel your pain, brother. I feel your pain.
Aside from watching movies and eating party mix.
All right. Okay. So today's episode. I'm not going to say it's going to be a lean one because every time we say that we record for over 2 hours. So yeah, today's episode will be following the usual format. We'll be kicking off with a discussion of the news in just a moment. Our second segment, we'll talk about what we've been playing recently, and I'll probably plug the other stuff on my YouTube channel like I normally do. And then our third segment, we're going to have our topic-based discussion. Today we're going to be having a sort of casual discussion about classic Konami. So look forward to that. Right, let's kick off with a bit of news. I'll start with just a couple of sort of tangentially related stories. One of which is sort of negative, one of which is positive. I don't want to dwell too much on the negative one because I'm sure other people on the internet are already doing that in great detail. But
I'm terrified to even sign on to any social media this morning.
Last night, at the time of recording, Xseed Games put out an announcement saying they were delaying the release of the new Senran Kagura game, which is the remake of the first game, Senran Kagura Burst Renewal, because they are removing the interactive intimacy mode from the PS4 version. If you've not played one of these games, the intimacy mode is actually a relatively minor part of the game, but it allows you to sort of directly interact with the various cast members, so you can sort of poke and prod them and grab their tits and admire their physics as they jiggle around and stuff. And the Vita versions, if you basically wanked off the screen, their clothes would tear. So it was a silly little thing, but it was a way of sort of having a bit of direct interaction with the characters. And they are stripping it out of the PS4 version, but they are leaving it in the Steam version, interestingly, which is going to launch simultaneously with the PS4 version rather than coming nearly a year later like previous installments. And Xseed has specifically said that this is down to Sony. This is them respecting the wishes of the platform holder, in their words. So this is not them being prudes and wanting to chop out things because they think it's creepy or gross or whatever. This is Sony saying, no, you can't do that. Which is kind of interesting because in the last couple of console generations, sort of PS3, early PS4, Vita and so on, Sony has been the place to go if you want your games with a bit of provocative, ecchi content. Obviously, they've not gone into full-on 18 plus adults only stuff, but yeah, the Vita in particular has been the place you went if you wanted to see that sort of experience. And Nintendo has historically been regarded as the more sort of censor-happy, if you like. So there were quite high-profile edits to Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Xenoblade X, and I think the fifth Fatal Frame game as well, Project Zero, Maiden of Blackwater, that people got very upset about. Most of the changes, to be honest, are not especially important, as this change in Senran Kagura isn't massively important either, because it's not part of the main game or the main story or anything like that. But with things like the actual outright banning of Omega Labyrinth Z a little while back, it's got people a bit concerned for how Sony is handling things going forward, particularly Sony's Western branch, I should say. Sony Japan is absolutely fine. Sony Asia who handles the Asia English releases, are absolutely fine as well. So I think going forward, we're probably going to see a lot more localization companies going the Asia English route, and people who want this kind of experience having to import through Play Asia, which works out a bit more expensive for those who want physical editions, but it does mean less likelihood of things getting chopped out and everyone getting really angry about it. So
I was gonna ask. Like, hopefully, we'll have a English language complete edition or whatever from the Asia region. My other question on this is, you'll have to excuse me because the only Senran Kagura game I've played seriously is the Vita version of Shinobi Versus, which is what two back, right? So Shinobi Versus, then it was Estival Versus, right?
Yeah.
So, did the PS4 versions of Shinobi Versus and Estival Versus have the interaction mode?
Yes, they did. So there's what it is it's part of the dressing room mode where you can dress up the characters and pose them and take photographs and stuff like that. And there's a special mode in that where you can you sort of press a button and it kind of zooms in on the character. And on the Vita you can use the touchscreen to do things. On the PS4 version you sort of use the analog sticks and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's always been there in the Sony versions. I can't remember if it was in the 3DS games, but it was definitely in the Vita and PS4 version. So it's something that's always been there.
That's why it's odd to me then. It's like this was okay for 1 and 2, but now it's not okay for 3. Like it's very strange.
And I mean, it's in Peach Beach Splash as well. And in Peach Beach Splash, you can do it in VR. So it's like. Yeah, so it seems very strange. Conjecture at the moment is that it's something to do with sort of new policies that Sony's Western branches have got. I haven't seen any sort of decisive evidence of this, but a couple of people have pointed out that sort of the Western arms of Sony used to actually be sort of have their sort of head honchos based in Tokyo and then sort of issuing commands out to the Western offices. But now it seems that a lot of that decision making has passed to a Californian branch of Sony, and some people are conjecturing that it's something to do with that. Like I say, I can't say for certain whether that actually is the case or not because I've not seen any specific evidence saying that, but it's plausible because it seems like it seems like there has been some sort of internal policy change with regards to this. So Omega Labyrinth obviously also fell foul of the actual UK censors, the Video Standards Council, but at the same time it didn't get released in America as well because Sony decided not to release it anywhere in English speaking territory. So yeah, they've definitely got something going on there. And at the same time, interestingly, people have pointed out that Nintendo are now a lot more willing to provide this sort of thing because not long ago we had the release of Senran Kagura Reflections on there, which is basically nothing but the intimacy mode.
Yeah, it's this the game.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, so yeah, no one really knows what's going on at the moment, but yeah, I think I would encourage any localizers to look at Switch ports because people want Switch ports anyway. I mean, yeah, put it on Switch is a meme for a reason. And two, to look at the Asia English market as well, because I know there's several games that have come out with English language versions that have seen some success releasing exclusively in Asia and then people importing them. So I think the most recent one of those that saw a decent amount of sales was Bullet Girls Fantasia.
Oh yeah, did that do well?
I haven't heard anything particularly negative about it, and the people who picked it up seem to have been enjoying it. So yeah, I guess it's worked out for them. And yeah, no one has sort of said, "Oh, we're never doing that again." So I guess that's a good sign.
Someone worked on that game that I really respect. It was like the developer. That was someone that I was like surprised.
It was wasn't it the developers who made Grand Stream Saga? The X Quintet people. It was something like that, wasn't it?
No, that's... Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, it is. It was a Shade.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Shade, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually imported that a while back, but I'm yet to boot it up, so I will do that at some point and report back, I'm sure. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, that game. Anyway, on a related note to that bad news, we have some good news, which is that Steam has pretty much firmly established what its new content policy is, because at the end of last week, Eve Nicole got released on Steam. And Eve Nicole is a game that there is no way you would ever be able to do an edited all ages version of, just because the sexual content is so integral to the story and the overall way that game works. Yeah, it is the full uncut version of that game on Steam, which is wonderful. Because one, it's a great game. Two, it's a sign that Steam is taking this sort of adult content on its platform seriously. And three, it's a chance for MoeGamer and Monolith Soft to get exposed to a wider audience who might not have previously come across this game. So, if you read MoeGamer.net last month, you'll know I had lots of nice things to say about Eve Nicole. It's a very good game. Great story, great characters, lovely art by Nan Yagashi of Senran Kagura fame. And yeah, just to see it randomly pop up on Steam was surprising and delightful. So that's some good news.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that too, because just based on your positive words about it, like, I'm very interested in playing that game. But I'm one of those guys who plays games on the computer. I'm hesitant to buy games that aren't on Steam or GOG. I just don't like having games on my computer that aren't managed nicely by a front end.
Yeah.
I know I'm not a huge computer game guy, and like, people make fun of me for it, but to me, just the convenience of having that nice front end to manage my game collection and stuff nicely like that it's huge. So now that I can put it on a wish list, maybe wait for a sale to happen and monitor that, like, much more likely to pick that game up and play it now. Like, 100 times more likely.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both approaches because, previously you would go direct to the publisher if you wanted that uncut version. Now things are coming on Steam. Obviously, you don't have to do that. You don't have to faff around with patches and stuff, as long as the publisher has put the uncut version on Steam, which some companies are still not doing, because if you do put an adults-only version on Steam, it is locked behind the adult content filter that you have to specifically opt into. So that will probably affect certain games' discoverability. But yeah, like I say, there's pros and cons, because on Steam, a lot of stuff is locked into the Steam ecosystem. So some games that are released on Steam, they won't start if you don't have Steam in there. So that means you can't back them up onto a disc, make a physical version of them or whatever. That's not an issue on GOG.com because they've always positioned themselves as DRM free. Eve Nicole is not on GOG because they actually don't have an adult content policy at the moment, despite introducing visual novels onto there in response to the Steam hoo-ha a couple of months back. But then obviously if you buy stuff directly from the publisher, you have to remember that you've bought it from their storefront, remember where you've put it on your PC, and so yeah, there's not really an easy solution of it. It's not like the old days of the old computers where you just had a big disc full of a big box full of floppy disks and you just pulled out what you wanted to play.
Yeah. With the presence on Steam, the likelihood of a bundle company doing it.
Yes, definitely.
Like it's now like 100 times more likely that maybe like in a year, Bundle Stars, or probably not Humble because they probably wouldn't touch the adult stuff. But like one of the other bundle companies might do an Alice Soft bundle.
Yeah.
Like the ability to get like a couple Rance games and Eve Nicole for like $15 and actually like expose like loads of people to that for a reasonable price. That would be like huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just my imagination going over time, but like that would be great.
It's perfectly plausible now because, like I say, Eve Nicole is no less sort of adult in terms of content than Rance is. The protagonist is a much nicer person than Rance is, but the game itself is still full of violent scenes and rape and monsters and all sorts of things like that. So this plausibly means that future Rance games could end up on Steam as well, which is good because there's 2 currently being localized. And hopefully some more after that as well. So, yeah, this will only be a good thing for Erika enthusiasts, Erika localizers, and publishers as well. So, that's good to see. All right, I'll let you speak for a bit. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, let's see. Hasn't been a super eventful 2 weeks. Cool little snippet. RE Dragon Quest X.
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Quest X being the MMO that the West never got.
Yes.
There was recently an interview in a live stream with Yu Miyake, who, on the subject of Dragon Quest's state in the West. He's the executive producer of Dragon Quest currently, the franchise. And he remarked that they are currently interested in looking into the possibility of an offline version of Dragon Quest X that may be able to be ported to the West.
Yeah.
Because Dragon Quest X, even though it's an MMO, is actually pretty story heavy, and many people have said that the story content and the characters are developed in such a way that, despite it being an MMO, it's pretty indistinguishable from a normal RPG in a lot of ways. So apparently it would translate quite well to being an offline MMO. Those of you who've listened to this in the past know that offline MMO style games are super my jam. So the idea of having an offline MMO style Dragon Quest makes me pretty happy. So, not really news, just a little snippet from an interview, but something to keep our hopes up about, because for those of us who like to collect Dragon Quest, of which I am among the number, and I know you are now, this would be incredible. So fingers crossed this turns into something.
Yeah, this was both surprising and interesting to see, because not long before this news story broke, there was another news story that I think was largely based on misinterpretation of something someone said, to be honest, which was basically that someone from Square Enix said that Dragon Quest XI needed to do well in the West, otherwise we might not get any more. Except that's not exactly what he said. That's what everyone interpreted the person as saying. He basically just said something along the lines of, "We hope it does well in the West," and everyone's found that out.
That's a surprise.
If you don't buy this game now, we'll not bring you any more Dragon Quest ever. So yeah, it was quite interesting to see this story break not long after that previous one. So, but yeah, I'm all for that. I've watched a bit of gameplay of Dragon Quest X, and from the look of things, it looks very much like something that could work offline. I mean, there's already AI companions in it. There's a lot of story content. So yeah, I see no reason why that couldn't work.
Yeah, it's always been a thorn in my side that I never got to play it. Just as a fan of Toriyama's artwork, like a character creator, Toriyama character creator. Like I want to get my hands on it. And there's cool ogre like races, and there's like a fish people race, and they're cute, and I need it.
Yes, that will be very cool indeed. All right, a few other things. I can't remember if we mentioned this last time. I think the actual story came after we recorded our last podcast, but this is a couple of weeks old news now. But Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 are coming to PS4 in early 2019, and they're going to have dual audio, which none of the current versions have, much to the annoyance of the most vocal parts of the Falcom fan base here in the West. But these
can't wait for them to be quiet finally.
I'm just not going to say anything.
I don't care. I'll make enemies.
But yeah, Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 are very, very well regarded installments in that series. And yeah, to see them coming to, this will be now the fourth platform they've been on, because they've been on Vita, PS3, PC, and now PS4. So yeah, that's great, and it sounds as if these PS4 versions are going to basically be the definitive versions.
I'm super excited.
Yeah,
I just, I'm one of those guys who loves to have like a series on a unified platform.
Yes.
So like now, I'm operating under the assumption that one day we'll get 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So now just to have a big chunk on my shelf of 1, 2, 3, and 4 all on one platform, delightful.
Yeah, that will be great. So that is a series I need to tackle at some point, but it's probably something I'm going to need to tackle like I've done Dragon Quest on the site, because it's just too big to try and tackle even one of those games in a single month. Cause
they're massive.
Each one of those games is at least sort of 100 hours to get through, and there's 3 Trails in the Sky games, then there's currently 2 Trails of Cold Steel games with hopefully 2 more on the way. So yeah, and they're all interconnected as well. And then there's also the series that the insufferable Falcom fans will never shut up about, not getting localizations of, which is the Crossbell series as well, which is the third part of this series that we haven't had any localization news of at all yet. So I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but we'll see.
Ooh, and there's also the original Gagar trilogy on the PSP that everyone forgets exists. I know the localizations of those weren't sterling, but they do exist. They do exist.
Yeah. Alright, moving on. A little while back, Sega teased a new strategy game with characters designed by Koji Igarashi of Castlevania fame. So this game is called Revolve 8 Episodic Dueling. We don't know a huge amount about it yet, but yeah, so...
There's footage now.
Oh, is there? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a MOBA on mobile, so like I want nothing to do with it. But
oh, okay, fair enough.
Some of the character design's pretty cool.
It's got people who worked on Yakuza, the Shin Megami Tensei mobile game, and Fate Grand Order on there as well. So yeah, it's got some good talent behind the art and stuff like that. But yeah, if it's just a mobile MOBA, then yeah,
pretty
not
much
too
so.
interested. That's a shame.
They're going an interesting route with the characters, where they're like taking like classic like fairy tale characters like Cinderella and like whatever, and then putting like a modern twist on them.
Right.
So, like, Cinderella is an idol, and the fairy godmother is her manager. Like everything has like a modern celebrity, like social media, like twist to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool how they're like reimagining those characters. It's the kind of thing where like I'll read the news just to see like the interesting character designs and stuff, but I really don't have a desire to play it.
Yeah. Alrighty. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Tokyo Games last time, which is the sort of collaborative effort between people who worked on Danganronpa and the Zero Escape series. They've revealed a few more details about one of the 4 projects they're working on, which is called Death March Club, which is the one that was described as a children's death game. So this is described as a controversial work where a death game unfolds between 12-year-old elementary school students. And the game's going to have action and adventure parts. So it sounds like it might be something along the lines of that Danganronpa spin-off game, Ultra Despair Girls, which I haven't played, but I know a lot of people enjoyed. Kodaka said that he was taking a break from Danganronpa, and he was wondering if it was enough death games. So Uchikoshi said he wanted to do another one, so they decided to do another one. He said this is going to be his last death game, then he's done with death games. Yeah.
What if he does a full 360 and his next games are like Affirmation of Life games? Just like visual novels about like cuddling puppies, and like the hardest decision you have to make is like, do you cuddle the Corgi or the Shiba Inu?
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah, so there's a few more details on that. There's been like a feature on it in I think it was Famitsu. So if you check Gematsu, I've got some scans of that. So check that out if you want to see a few more images and so on.
This was really cool news for me, because out of all the games that they had kind of announced and shared about, when the original news was shared about the studio forming, I found the art for the flash art images for this particular game really arresting. I really like the art style of like the characters.
It's got a really distinctive art style, hasn't it? It's got sort of pastel colors combined with darkness, so it's a really, really striking look.
Yeah, so like the news that this was also going to be a side scroller like means that I will actually be interested in playing it. Like it's super, super cool.
Yeah, interested to see how that ends up. All right, what else have we got?
Some of the release dates.
Yep.
Left Alive, which is Squaresoft's new game set in the Front Mission universe with the kind of military espionage setting, is coming to the West on March 5th, 2019. There's going to be a huge collector's edition that includes a really detailed action figure of one of the giant robots that I'll be fighting with myself about ordering. We also have release date now for Tetris Effect.
Oh, yes.
I am very excited about, because we've also been confirmed to be getting a physical edition.
Hooray!
Tetris Effect is, of course, the new version of Tetris for PS4 with VR capability that is being done by the genius behind Rez. So if you haven't seen the footage, it is absolutely beautiful and trippy, and there's neon lights everywhere, and it's gonna be delightful.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting to try in VR, because really abstract stuff works wonderfully in VR. There's the Jeff Minter game Polybius that is probably my favourite PSVR game. That's so abstract, and just sort of the weird patterns and stuff floating around you just works so well in that environment. So yeah, looking forward to this.
The only experience I've had with VR that I haven't hated was Rez. was the PS4 version of Res. Specifically, the special stage, it was designed with VR in mind. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So yeah, this will definitely be one to try out.
Talking of VR, PlayStation Europe announced today that on the 14th of December there's going to be a VR version of Borderlands 2.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's like, that's I don't want to use the word proper game, but it's an established game that they are sort of bringing to VR, and it sounds as if they've made some specific attempts to incorporate VR specific functionality to it as well. So they've implemented this feature called BAMF time, which is badass mega fun time. And it's basically a take on bullet time, but it means that you can sort of dodge bullets and use your skills in a way that's a bit more practical with this sort of increased physicality of playing it in VR. So they've modified a lot of the special abilities and skill trees to add in this BAMF time stuff and make it a bit more practical.
Neat.
They appear to have taken out the multiplayer mode, which is, to be honest, fine by me because I actually fairly rarely played Borderlands multiplayer anyway. But yeah, the VR game is specifically going to be designed as a single player experience. So they've updated a bunch of skills that previously relied on you having a co-op partner to work in a more single player context.
Interesting.
And you'll also be able to drive vehicles from a first-person perspective now, and aim the vehicle's guns by looking in that direction. So it's similar to the way Super Stardust VR mode does stuff. That's quite a natural way of handling the aiming function in a sort of vehicle-based game. So that's going to be interesting. So that's the 14th of December that's coming out.
Oh, it's not long at all.
Yeah, not at all. It sounds as if it's going to be a separate release rather than an update to the Handsome collection, I think. So you'll have to buy it again. But yeah, it sounds like they're putting in a fair amount of work to that to get it up and running.
This is particularly interesting to me because part of the issue I have with the PSVR specifically is that the resolution is just so low that I find games that attempt to have a more realistic look, I just find the illusion totally shattered by the fuzz everywhere. Yeah. So I particularly like the Borderlands series, obviously, for its unique visual presentation. So to have that cel-shaded presentation in VR, where perhaps the lower resolution won't matter as much because it is a more comicized, colorful, and stylized presentation, should be a pretty big victory.
Yeah. So that should be good. Okay, a couple of other little things. Special Reserves have announced that they are doing a physical version of Enter the Gungeon for PS4 on November the 13th. It looks like they're doing quite a nice sort of special edition of it as well. So rather than just a straight physical release, there's going to be like a fancy box set and so on. Someone actually leaked it a day early, so they haven't released the full details yet. But yeah, that's the thing that's happening.
Yeah, I've been excited for this for a while. I've been wrestling with it for a while, whether or not I want to rebuy this game, because I really believe this is one of the best games in like recent history. I know we talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah.
In our physical copies, please episode, and the book that comes with it, the copy of Ammonomicon that they're printing, is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Yep, so that's definitely one to watch out for if you enjoyed that. That is a really good game. And last thing I wanted to mention is actually something I spotted just before we started recording, which is a game that's being published by Dangan Entertainment on Steam. It's called Devil Engine. It's not due out until winter of this year, but they've just released a demo version of it. And this is a shoot-'em-up, specifically designed to be 32-bit pixel art style. And I fired up the demo just before we were recording here. Oh my god, it's beautiful.
I downloaded the demo as soon as I saw you posting a link, so I'll check it out this afternoon. But the video footage, yes, please.
Oh, it's delightful. It looks wonderful. So they've nailed that sort of 32-bit pixel art look. So it's sort of slightly higher resolution than what you typically expect from indie devs doing fake pixel art. But it's still got those lovely sharp edges and so on. It's got a soundtrack by, let me try not to butcher this name, it's Hyakutaro Tsukumo, who has previously worked on a number of the Thunder Force games, among other things.
Oh, no way!
Yeah.
Oh, Thunder Force games got good music!
Yeah, so he's doing that. He's also worked on a few other things as well. He's worked on Sina Rukana, which is the sequel to Acelia the Eternal, which is only I will be excited about. But you know, he's also done some stuff for Alice Soft as well. Interestingly, he did some of the soundtrack for Beat Blade's Haruka as well, which is not a game I'm familiar with, but it's actually the first Alice Soft game that MoeGamer localized before they did Rants. So he did the soundtrack for that. And he's done all sorts of things. So look him up on vgmdb.net if you want to see. He's got a pretty extensive discography that goes right back into the 90s. So, yeah, that's all the news I wanted to talk about. Anything else you wanted to bring up?
Just two little mentions before we wrap things up. What's up, Monolith Soft recruiting staff for a new RPG by the Xenoblade team.
Ooh.
So, yippee-ki-yay. Takahashi shared a message that the recruitment is looking to really get like elite people together. This is this is Monolith Soft's quote unquote first production team, where their motto is the select few, right? Like the best of the best. So they're looking for programmers, map planners, technical artists, designers, and overall management staff. So it sounds like they're really beefing up to make something new. So huzzah, because more Monolith Soft is good for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's really exciting because, like, if they can put out something like these Xenoblade games with sort of working at what they seem to be implying is a fraction of their full power. Yeah, just imagine what's...
When you consider what Monolith Soft does, it's really quite amazing, because part of their staff also helped make Breath of the Wild while they were making Xenoblade 2.
Yes.
Like, everyone forgets that, like, Monolith Soft basically developed Breath of the Wild. Like, it's basically a Xenoblade game. So that's cool, because they're quite an amazing studio, and their history is quite amazing if you ever have a chance to research it. I also just wanted to again take some time today to plug Pixel Art Studios' Bushiden on Kickstarter.
Oh yes, I saw they introduced a new character, didn't they? As well.
Yeah, well, that's if they hit $100,000, you get to be the main character's cute girl sister. They're gonna make a second playable character if they hit $100,000. It's unlikely that'll happen. There's only about 13 days left, and they haven't hit their original 70,000 goal yet. So at this point, I'm just urging people to please throw $5 their way so they can at least hit the 70,000 goal. As of the last time I talked about it on our previous episode, they have added a physical Switch copy tier.
Nice.
So, I'm in on that. But please, Bushiden on Kickstarter by Pixel Art Studios. Please give them $5 so that they can make this game exist, because it's gorgeous. Yeah,
it does look absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, I'd love to see that happen as well. I haven't chipped them any money yet, but because I just threw some money at Venus Blood Frontier, which I talked a bit about last time.
Yes, that looks good too.
Yes. So yeah, do support that if you want to see more of that kind of thing. Okay, anything else you want to mention?
No, that's what I got.
Wonderful stuff. All right, let's take a short break then, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about what we've been playing recently. So, see you in a moment. Welcome back. So, for our second segment, we talk about what we've been playing recently. Would you like to go first, Chris?
I'm ashamed to say I haven't been playing that much, but I did manage to wrap up my pure pacifist run in Undertale last weekend, which was delightful. The game just continues to surprise and amaze me in ways I'm not expecting. I can't ruin anything for anyone, so I won't go into too much detail, but... I am very much a fan of kind of metatextual games or postmodern games, to the point where it's something I've been very heavily considering writing a book about in the near future. Basically, games that are about games, and like in the way that like Yoko Taro's games like to explore genre hybridity and stuff like that. And Undertale's ability to explore interactivity to toy with your emotions in unique ways is really something super unique, and I recommend everybody experience it. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. The sort of metatextual thing seems to sort of be becoming a bit fashionable again, because we've seen a few things trying to do things like that. So obviously a little while back we had Doki Doki Literature Club, which did the same for the visual novel genre. I just recently watched a playthrough on Pro Jared's Let's Play channel of a game called Bummertown that was basically about a dude who was aware he was the main character in the game, and the game was broken and buggy and so on, and different developers seem to handle this more effectively than others. I tend to find it works best when it's sort of not sort of thrusting the metatextual aspect right in the player's face and saying, look, aren't we clever? We're doing so many clever things with this. Which a lot of developers are still struggling a little bit with. Like this Bummertown one was just a little bit too on the nose with the sort of ironic humour and such like. But yeah, other stuff has been pretty good. Doki Doki Literature Club's become a bit of a meme ever since. But certainly when it was first available and no one knew about it, quite a lot like Undertale. In fact, it was very effective. So.
Are you familiar with Penny Arcade's like visual novel video series they do?
No.
Yeah, it's like Penny Arcade's been doing this thing recently where they like pick a visual novel because they discovered that like it was a genre that was gaining like popularity now in the popular market that they were kind of unfamiliar with. It's like, you know, the Penny Arcade guys are good guys, and they were like, let's familiarize ourselves more with this with the genre we don't know much about. So they do they play visual novels together on their Twitch stream like socially, and like do like do live readings.
Oh, okay.
Like they do like, you know, like one of them, like they'll pick characters and they do like live readings of visual novels. So like they did like Doki Doki Literature Club recently, and I think they did the one where you try to bang dads.
Oh yeah, Dream Daddy, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool, like to the point where Doki Doki Literature Club has become kind of popular enough that like an outlet as large as Penny Arcade is interested in exploring it. I thought that was really interesting.
People have kind of mixed feelings about that, because on the one hand it's cool that there's lots of Western developers who are trying a bit more on this, but I've seen a few discussions about this recently. Is Western developers are really bad at doing a sincere visual novel. They're very, very bad at taking it seriously. Like pretty much every one of those examples that we've cited there, they're all like super ironic, and it's like, hey, it's a game where you get to date gay dads, and it's like all a big joke. Whereas if you sort of look at the sort of classics of the genre, if you want to say, they play it straight. They are there to tell a story. They are not there to sort of try and be self-aware about the fact they're visual novels and stuff like that. And there's a place for both things, but I think a lot of Western developers need to kind of work on that sincerity factor if they want to sort of continue and be regarded on the same level as some of the more well-established classics, I think. So yeah, it's good that they're gaining in popularity, certainly.
Yeah, so like, going back to the idea of kind of sincerity and, you know, not being beat over the head with metatextuality, I find Undertale being an example of a game that does it extremely well, because they've done it in the best possible way, which is that they've tied the metatextuality cleverly into the narrative.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the metatextual mechanical stuff that happens in the games kind of related to cycles of life and death, and like the idea that you've been here before, you may have died before. So that's all been tied into the mythology of the world, the things that are going on around you in the story. So it's not done in a way that it's saying, hey, looky here, look how clever we are. It's just a natural part of the narrative that you experience.
Yeah, that for me is the ideal way of doing it. It's obviously making references to things and allowing you to make those connections in your mind, but it's not beating you over the head with it. It's not making those things explicit. You have to actually interpret them for yourself, and that's always much more satisfying. Yeah,
like one of my favorite things, like, an example I'll give that's not like too spoilery because it doesn't have anything to do with the story, is one of the last bosses. One of the things with Undertale is you have, besides like your normal attack item use, you have a command where you can interact with the monsters, and that's the way you achieve a peaceful resolution. And those commands will change contextually based on the monster you're fighting. And for one of the last bosses, there's a talk command because you're trying to beg for mercy because he wants to kill you. And if you use the talk command with this boss, it says, you talk to, and I won't even say the boss's name because that's a spoiler. Like you talk to so and so. You tell them that he has killed you once before, and then he nods. And then there's an adjective after that, like he nods knowingly. Depending on how many times you've lost to that boss, that adjective changes.
All right.
So like if you've lost to him, I think it's 12 times or more, like it becomes like he nods with pity. Like it starts off with like he nods knowingly, then it he nods and looks sad, and then like the last cheer is like he nods with pity. Like so, like, it's little stuff like that isn't huge, but really enhances the way you're thinking about your interaction with the game itself, and not just the narrative contained within. Very cool game.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds really good. Like I say, it's one that's on my radar, and as we've talked about previously, now the hype has died down a little bit. It's something I can come to a bit more objectively and judge for myself. So yeah, looking forward to giving that a try at some point. All right, you been playing anything else?
Just Mega Man 11.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Which the less I talk about, the better, because it's hard as balls, and I haven't beaten a single level yet.
Oh my god!
And more than that, I haven't encountered a single robot master yet. I haven't gotten far enough in a single level to fight a robot master yet.
Reminds me of a video I recorded the other day on the Atari ST version of Ghouls and Ghosts, where I couldn't get halfway through the first level. It was like,
yeah, like it's tough, and like I'm a Mega Man guy. Like my whole life, this is really tough Mega Man. This isn't Mega Man for Mega Man like buffs. It's not fooling around. Like most of the levels have mini bosses, which is not normal for Mega Man. Yeah. And the checkpoints are pretty sparse, and everything hits hard. Like they really made a game for Mega Man diehards here, to the point where I'm thinking of doing an easy mode run, which is not something I normally do. I usually like to experience a game on normal, because to me that's the balanced difficulty that it was designed with.
Yeah.
But I might have to do an easy mode run just to see everything, because like I said, at this point I've had it for over a week and I haven't even gotten to a boss of a single level yet.
Yeah, I know there's this sort of weird elitism about easy mode, but I think in games that are specifically designed to be challenging and based on things like memorization and stuff, I don't think there's any shame in going down to easy mode. Like I play a lot of shoot 'em ups on easy mode because it allows you to get to know the game, and then once you're familiar and you can clear it sort of fairly reliably on that easy mode, you can then sort of graduate up to the higher difficulty levels. I think that a lot more so than like a 50-hour open world epic where the hard mode is just everything hits harder and has more hit points.
Yeah. What's nice about the longer games too is usually the difficulty on like RPGs is flexible. Like it's just a menu change. You can kind of turn it on and off.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm interested to explore in Xenoblade 2 when I go back to it to look at Torna and so on, because they've added that whole dynamic difficulty options menu where you can sort of tweak everything about the way the game works.
That was the best part about Bravely Default.
Yeah, so that's cool. Anything more to say about that?
No, I wish I had more to say, but I have not experienced enough of it.
Well,
it's beautiful. It's great. They've done a really good job of translating the feel and the aesthetic of classic Mega Man to the 3D plane. I'm really delighted with the presentation of it. The new Robot Masters are all designed really cool. I wish I could say whether or not it was cool to fight them. I just think the designs are neat. But so far, I'm really happy with the game. Just disappointed at how old and crappy I am at it.
You'll get it back eventually, I'm sure. I'm sure we'll hear more about your suffering in the coming weeks. Okay, all right. I've got a few things to talk about this week. So I'll start with a package from Limited Run Games finally arrived this week. So it had the Vita version of VA11 Hall A Valhalla, which I haven't opened up yet because I played the PC version to death, but I probably will return to the Vita version at some point because I know they've added a bit of content since I played it for the first time. But the other game I got in that package was a game called Xenon Valkyrie Plus.
Oh yeah, how is that?
It's really fun. It's really, really good. This is a game originally by a developer called Diabolical Mind, who, hold on, there's actually a manual in this game box, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, Limited Run doesn't fool around.
Yeah, it tells you a little bit about the game. So the original developer is a guy called Daniel Fernandez Chavez, who is Spanish. And then this guy called Fabrice Breton from a little one-man show called Cowcat Games is taken it upon himself to do enhanced versions of this Spanish developers' games. So the previous game he did was Riddled Corpses, which was a twin-stick shooter with sort of zombies and.
Oh, you quite like that too, right?
Yeah, that was really fun. And in fact, that's what inspired me to pick up this limited run game in the first place, because I hadn't heard of the game before that. But yeah, so Xenon Valkyrie is. It's a platform game with sort of roguelike elements, which I know is sort of done to death these days, but. I really like the way this handles things, because it's not trying to play too hard on the kind of Metroidvania approach. It's probably the closest comparison I can think of is the original Spelunky.
Oh, okay.
So sort of
more like short runs.
Yeah. So sort of before before they did the enhanced version of Spelunky with the better graphics and stuff, like when it was still a pixel art freeware game. It reminds me very much of that, only with a sort of gorgeous sci-fi twist. The graphics in it are beautiful. So it's got a kind of 16-bit look to it. So it's got quite big pixels and reasonably limited use of colour, but more than you'd get in a kind of 8-bit inspired game. It's got a chiptune soundtrack. And the levels are designed in such a way that you can sort of see the whole layout of them from the beginning. So you have a little mini-map in the corner. And the aim in each is basically get from the top to the bottom. So there's no sort of Metroidvania style exploration between rooms and stuff. It's sort of one self-contained square level that you start at the top and you have to work your way down to the bottom of. And along the way, it actually incorporates a surprising number of elements from more traditional roguelikes. So it's got the idea that rather than rushing down to the bottom, you should try and take out as many enemies as possible on the way, because it's got a leveling system. And the leveling system is not something that levels you up automatically, but every level you gain a talent point. So between levels, you can spend those on increasing your hit points, your attack, your maximum ammunition, or your defense. So you can kind of create a custom character build as you progress through the game.
It's fun.
And then it's also got destructible scenery as well. So much like in the most traditional roguelikes, you can actually dig out the walls and create your own passageways and stuff. You can blow up walls in this and create your own pathways down to things that might otherwise be inaccessible or difficult to get to. There's 3 different characters to play from the outset. I'm not sure if there's extra unlockable ones, but there's definitely 3 to start with, and they've each got their own unique capabilities. So the default character, who's sort of a cute sci-fi girl with white hair, she's got an energy sword and a laser pistol, and she can stick time bombs onto walls and ceilings. So those can be used to create new pathways and such like. There's this weird sort of Bugman character who his special ability is that he can jump really high. So rather than being able to actually blow up walls in this, he can access different areas just by being a lot more mobile than the other 2 characters. And then the third character, her special ability is she's got a radar, so that you can see on the minimap exactly where things like the treasure chests and the items and stuff are. So you can plan out where you need to go from there. And yeah, it just plays really nicely. So it's got nice responsive controls. It's designed in such a way that in each level there's different types of enemies, and you can learn to recognize their behaviors. And as you get to the different worlds in the game, the different types of enemies are they're almost like reskins of these basic behaviors. So you got ones that wander back and forth and shoot at you. You got ones that explode when you defeat them. You've got ones that will get knocked back and bounce around when you hit them, and so on. So as you progress through the game, it's a case of learning to recognize how each of these different enemies are going to behave and how best to deal with them. So because you've got access to both this melee attack with a sword of some description and a ranged attack which has got limited ammunition. And yeah, I've been really enjoying it so far. I'm up to the 3rd world so far. I'm not sure how many there are in total, but I'm up to the 3rd world. So there's 2 stages in each world, so it doesn't outstay its welcome. You have a boss at the end of each world, and there seems to be maybe 2 different possibilities for what each boss is at the end of each world. And then if you defeat a boss and have the right combination of resources in your inventory, so the right amount of currency, the right amount of this stuff called it's called Teamrite or something like that, the sort of like the major currency in the game, and a key which you would normally use to open treasure chests and get new weapons. Then you can unlock a teleporter, and that means that once you've done that, you can then start from that stage in subsequent playthroughs if you want to. You don't have to, and obviously going from the beginning allows you to take your time a bit more and level up a bit more. But if you start from the later stages, it gives you a certain amount of free talent points, so you're not starting from later in the game but with less capabilities. But if you do go from the beginning, you'll have the potential to earn more of those talent points. So, for example, by the time I reached the second world playing from the beginning, I can be about maybe level 10 or 11 or so. If you go via the teleporter, it gives you 5 talent points. So it's as if you gained 5 levels on the way down. So you won't be as effective, but there's enough points there to buff yourself up a little bit, at least.
It's also a way to introduce challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it seems to be a really well-designed game so far that I'm having a lot of fun with. Each run is... it's not super short, so it's not something that will kill you off immediately. But each run is short enough that you can boot it up, have a quick playthrough, and just enjoy yourself. Or you can spend a few hours with it if you want to, which is great.
And that sounds really good.
Yeah, so I've been having a lot of fun with that.
Not sure why I passed on this one. Probably just... You can't own every video game. It's probably just a money thing, you know.
Exactly.
It's the only problem with limited run, right?
Yeah.
You've got to make a pretty snap decision.
Yes, and especially when you bear in mind their shipping costs to Europe. Ugh.
Oh yeah, it's true.
But anyway, what else have I been playing? I played a really fun visual novel this week called Lucy Got Problems, which I enjoyed a whole lot. This is a game about a succubus who is not very good at being a succubus. Which is my favourite kind of devil girl. Is a devil girl who's not very good at being a devil.
What's her name from Gabriel Dropout? My favourite.
Yeah, Satania. Yeah.
There's an Android of her now. I'm dying.
Oh, great. So the concept of Lucy Got Problems is she's been dispatched by the Legion of Darkness and her mistress Tiamat, who she's obsessed with because Tiamat's hot. But she finds herself in a forest, and because she wasn't listening during the mission briefing, she has no idea what she's supposed to be doing or why she's there. And so over the course of the story, you have to try and sort of help her remember what she's supposed to be doing and either accomplish the mission or just go off in a completely different direction. And what I really liked about this is a lot of developers of these sort of low budget visual novels tend to just take a straight kinetic approach, so there's no choices and so on. They've really made an effort with the branching structure of this one because it's got a really complicated tree of choices and so on. So it doesn't take you down discrete routes. What it does is it takes you to different scenes will happen in the story regardless, but the context from which you approach those scenes can be different depending on the choices you made. So sometimes you come to a situation and Lucy will understand what's going on because she's learned something earlier in the narrative that is to do with that. And in another playthrough, you would have gone in a completely different direction, and she has no idea what is happening just because she has no context for this stuff that's going on. And that makes the different routes through the story really, really interesting. I
would like to interrupt you just for a moment to note for our listeners that the developer of this particular title is Flat Chest Dev.
Yes.
That is the name of the developer of this particular game.
Yes.
Please continue.
Yes. They have a lovely logo as well, which is a little cat girl hiding in a treasure chest. This game is anything but flat-chested. There is a lot of boob action in this. There is the new jiggly boobs mechanic from the latest version of Ren'Py as well. So enjoy that. There is a free uncensor patch as well. It's not particularly sex heavy or anything, but there are a few dirty scenes in it, as you'd expect from a game starring a succubus. But yeah, it's just a really fun, silly story that has demon girls and elves in it. So if you're into that kind of thing, one, have a read through of my look at it on MoeGamer this week, and two, pick it up because it's not very expensive either. All right, what else?
There's also a demo.
Oh yes, there is a demo. So yeah, do check that out. It'll give you an idea of whether it's the sort of thing you're into. Actually, one thing I do want to mention about that as well is that they've it's not a gameplay-centric game by any means. It's not trying to be a role-playing game or anything, but they have made a specific effort to add some gameplay elements into it. So, like, there's a sequence partway through the game where you have to find stuff. So there's a little point-and-click sequence where you can freely move between locations, and you have to find objects on the screen and so on. But during that sequence, there is also a button that basically just says, screw it, I'm going to cheat, and so you can skip it altogether. And again, making that choice affects part of the story as well. So, yeah, so that's well worth checking out, and I hope we see a lot more of Lucy in the future, because she's a really, really fun character. And finally, I think for today, I probably better mention this month's cover game series on the site, which is Project Zero, also known as Fatal Frame in the States and just Zero in Japan. So this is survival horror with ghosts and a camera rather than zombies and guns. I've actually sort of been meaning to come back to this series for a long time. So people who have followed what I've been doing on the internet for a long time will know that I used to be part of a group of people who wrote about and did podcasts on games called the Squadron of Shame. We had our roots on the 1UP boards, and one of the earlier games we did, even before we did the podcast for the Squadron of Shame, was the first Project Zero, the original Fatal Frame. We were looking at this back when it was reasonably current, so when the PS2 was still a current thing. So, God, that was nearly 20 years ago now. That's frightening. Yeah, so I've been meaning to come back to this series ever since then, because during that initial playthrough, I got most of the way through the game, and then for whatever reason didn't finish it. So I've never known how it ended. And I beat it this week, so it only took me nearly 20 years to do that, but I finally beaten the first Project Zero, which is a really cool game. You say you're not overly familiar with this series, are you?
No, I'm fond of us actually. I don't like them, but I don't like survival horror games in general.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I find them boring. Mm-hmm. So a survival horror game with no guns is even more boring to me. I just find these games to be like a major snore fest, which sucks because I love Japanese culture, obviously, and I love Japanese ghost stories and Japanese horror specifically. So it's difficult for me to reconcile the fact that I really love the setting and the urban legends and stuff that these titles are attempting to tap into, which is why I keep trying them, but I always bounce off them because I just find the core gameplay to be quite boring.
Yeah, fair enough. I quite like the way Project Zero plays because the camera mechanics I find quite interesting. So it's not just sort of pointing various grades of weapons at things and shooting. So there's an element of skill and targeting and that sort of thing in there, and there's lots of different types of skill shots you can do that earn more points. When you finish the game, there's a battle mode unlocks that sort of really challenges you to earn as many points as possible with these camera shots and so on. And I just really like that nice, interesting, non-gun based twist on side of things. As you've mentioned, your mileage may vary with that, but I really like it. The first Project Zero is they keep the narrative side of things relatively light, and so it's mostly based on exploration and finding your way from different parts of the house to the other. But there is an ongoing story in the background, but it's kept reasonably subtle. As the series has progressed, from what I understand, I haven't played any of the others yet. I'm working on that. They kind of up the ante with the narrative side of things a bit more, particularly with the remake of the second one for the Wii version, which is the one I'm going to be playing and covering next. So I'm interested to see how that develops. I know it's one of those series that among survival horror fans, they like it a lot, but it's one that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as stuff like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. So that's the main reason I wanted to cover it this month. And also it's October, so you have to be all spoopy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that is we've kicked off our coverage of that on MoeGamer.net this month. A little bit late because Eve Nicole took a little bit longer to beat than I thought it was going to, but that is all done and dusted now. So watch out for reports on those as the month goes on. I'm going to try and do all 5 of the games if possible. They're quite short, each of them. They're sort of like 6 to 8 hours each, not taking into account the extra content that unlocks and replays and such like. The fourth one is a Japan-only release for the Wii, but there is quite a well-known, well-established fan translation patch for it. So if my copy of that arrives in time, I ordered one in Japan, from eBay a little while back, but that is coming from Japan. So it's anyone's guess as to when that might arrive, if it arrives on time. So
there's one on the 3DS too, isn't there? Or am I making that up?
No, there's like a sort of spin-off game on 3DS. I'm not going to have time to look into that one this time, but it's a sort of spin-off that ties in with the 5th one, I think.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, but that is a completely separate thing. There was also a mobile phone game from the sort of pre-smartphone era as well that had its own story and so on. So it's a series that's been running for quite a long time and across several different platforms. But yeah, I will do my best to get through it as much as possible in this month. Having a lot of fun with that so far. And obligatory plug of other stuff that is happening on my YouTube channel at the moment. So we have the Atari A to Z series, which I've just recorded like 10 new videos for that. So I've forgotten exactly where we are in terms of the ones that have been released. So let me just check that. Right, so currently in Atari 8-bit games, I've just covered a game called Henri, which is a shameless Mr. Do ripoff by a guy called Adam Billiard, who went on to create some very well-established and well-known Atari 8-bit games called Electra Glide and Chop Suey. Henri's a bit crap, to be honest, but, you know, it's all right. Legend has it he kind of shat this game out in a couple of weeks so he could pay for a plane ticket. So it kind of shows. It's not crap, but it's not up to the standard of the stuff he produced later. Let's put it that way.
I wish we still lived in an age where you could crap a game out in a few weeks to play for a plane. It's like that's insane to me that there's so many stories of these old games like that.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing when you think about it, isn't it?
Like here's a commercial product. Yeah. Like I produced in several days.
Yeah, please buy it. I need to get home. Yeah, you just turn to Kickstarter and Indiegogo for that now, don't you?
Yeah, right. But then your game still takes 2 years to make.
That's true. Yeah. Other stuff at the Atari ST side of things, I've just covered a game called Chase by Mastertronic, which was developed by a chap called Tony Barker, who one of my YouTube commenters seems to think is a coding genius, to quote them. I haven't come across them, to my knowledge anyway, but Chase is a cool sort of vector graphics arcade-style game that's obviously heavily inspired by the Star Wars arcade machine.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a cool game. I mean, it's a really simple game. You don't do much more than dodge things and shoot stuff, but sometimes that's all you want.
That's mostly what I want.
Yeah. And this was a budget price release as well, so it wasn't anything that was sort of expecting you to pay 20 quid for something that you'd have a quick blast on for 5 minutes. So Mastertronic were sort of masters of the quick hit bits of entertainment in the 8 and 16-bit era. Okay, I think I've covered everything I want to talk about. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap this section up?
No, I'm good. Like I said, I haven't had much chance to play stuff, but it is my birthday weekend this weekend, so there might be some free video games or money to put toward free video games in my future. So maybe I'll have some good news next week if the birthday gods are listening. Wink, wink, Dead Cells. Wink, wink, Torna.
Excellent. And if not, I'm sure we'll hear more about your Mega Man suffering. So. All right, let's take a short break there, and then we'll come back with our discussion of Konami. See you in a moment. Welcome back. For our third segment, as regular listeners will know, we pick a topic to talk about of some description. Last week we all got a bit serious, so we wanted to keep things we wanted to keep things reasonably light-hearted today. So we're going to talk about Konami. However, we don't want to focus too much on sort of the negative side of modern Konami and fuck Konami and all that. So we want to kind of celebrate the cool stuff that they've done in the past, because whatever you might think of Konami now, there is little denying that they are sort of a defining figure in the games industry as it was growing up and reaching maturity. So Chris here is probably a little bit more familiar with their early days than I am, so I'm going to defer to Chris for the moment to lead this discussion. So take it away.
Alrighty. Well, I wanted to talk about this today for a couple reasons. The main reason is that Konami is becoming slightly more relevant in the news again. Who knows what can cause this, right? We could like sit around and speculate, but I feel like just like maybe they hired someone new or promoted someone from below that actually cares about their history, because there's some really interesting stuff happening, right? Obviously, we've got the Castlevania re-release of Symphony of the Night and Rondo of Blood coming out at the end of this month for the PS4. Yep. I'll stay my tongue about how angry I am that it's going to have the PSP localization and there's no Die Monster, you don't belong in this world.
So disappointed. Disappointed.
It's heresy. But at least, as we mentioned last time, a new generation of people will have an affordable way to access Rondo of Blood, which is a very difficult game to play affordably and a very beautiful game. And of course, Symphony of the Night's the best video game ever made. So, great. Besides that, people have noticed this week that the Suikoden official website, which no one has touched or updated in many, many years, has got some activity on it. So there's a lot of speculation going around that perhaps maybe Suikoden 1 and 2 will be getting some nice remaster treatment in the same way Symphony of the Night is. Everyone's kind of doubtful that we're going to get a new Suikoden because we said we weren't going to bash Konami, but they don't really make video games anymore. So it's highly doubtful that we're going to get a new Suikoden, but some remasters would be really great because that series has some real ardent fans. And most recently, getting me excited was for mobile phones, Konami released rather quietly a game called Pixel Puzzle Collection, which is just Picross. It's standard Picross, but all just classic Konami 8-bit sprites. It is 100% free to play, and by that I mean also no microtransactions.
Oh, awesome.
It's just a game you can have and play at your leisure, and like, who doesn't want Picross on the go? I kind of downloaded it cynically, but have ended up really just enjoying it all week long because it's a really adorable kind of tribute to Konami history. For a free game, the production values are quite high, and the puzzles are categorized by either game or game category. So like, there's a whole Castlevania category, and they'll throw a puzzle at you and they'll say, this is a puzzle from Castlevania, this is a puzzle from Gradius, this is a puzzle from our history of action games. There's great music from classic Konami games that play as you work on the puzzles, and it's just a really refreshing, really fun distraction. And the historical aspect of it just kind of got me thinking about how kind of integral Konami was to my youth. Castlevania is my favorite franchise of all time. Period. I keep my Castlevania games on a separate shelf. I love Castlevania. And I think a lot of people do, obviously. And there's just a lot of Konami franchises that are precious to a lot of people. So I just kind of wanted to take some time to kind of talk about some Konami memories and what franchises and games we played that were important to us growing up that Konami had a hand in. I'll kind of flip the script on you from last week, and I've prepared some interview questions to see how you feel about classic Konami. So,
excellent.
Just broadly, Pete, what are some of your associations with classic Konami? I, for instance, associate classic Konami with a very specific kind of very frenetic side scroller. Like the old run and gun formula, like Contra kind of thing. So that's kind of in my head always what Konami is associated with. So kind of for you, what do you think of when you think of Konami in the classic mold?
Well, like I've said a few times, sort of the 8 and 16-bit era, certainly the 8 and 16-bit era, I was very much a computer gamer rather than a console gamer.
Sure.
It wasn't until the mid to late SNES era, and then into the PlayStation and N64 that I started really getting into console games and Japanese games as an extension. I still came into contact with a few Konami games, though. Castlevania is one that I came into contact with very early, the first one. When I first came into contact with that, it was on. Let me see if I can remember. It was my parents' friends' daughter's NES, and we were visiting them for a weekend, and they basically shunted me and the various other kids who were in attendance for this dinner party or whatever was going on, and we just went off and played the NES for a little while. And one of the games that we played was Castlevania. At the time, I was sort of too young to be really aware of things like who developed and published games and that sort of thing. So I didn't have an awareness that this was a Konami game as such. But it was a game that left a strong impact on me. The time that I probably became most aware of Konami and started associating things with them would be the Super NES era. So anytime someone says Konami to me now, I think of the little Konami splash screen from the SNES era, where the star goes across and as the purple line goes down the screen, it goes...
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, the Konami I want to talk about today is the orange double ribbon Konami. That's what I call it. Like that logo that would fill in.
Yeah.
That's Konami to me.
Yeah, so when someone says Konami to me, that is what I think of, and normally, almost immediately afterwards, I think of something like the Turtles game.
Yeah,
So something like Turtles in Time on the Super NES is probably sort of peak Konami for me. I did play stuff like Gradius 3. I played on the Super NES. I didn't play any of the previous ones. I didn't play Contra until much later. So I never played Contra or what did they call it over here? Super Probotector.
Yeah, I always forget about Probotector.
Yeah,
I'm always a little jealous because the sprites are all like sweet, like mecha dudes in Probotector. Like, I never quite understood why that change was made.
No, I don't really know either. It must have just been something to do with sort of the way Nintendo was at the time.
And like military violence or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean that doesn't explain why America then got that, because Nintendo of America was far worse with that sort of thing at the time than Europe was, I think. So it's surprising that they got the sort of military action and we got the sweet ass mecha suits. But yeah, so either way, that was not a game that I was particularly familiar with until much later. So sort of well after it was a current game. So yeah, in answer to the question, I think that 16-bit Konami logo is the thing I most readily associate with them. Closely followed by belt-scrolling beat-em-ups, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, right? Like we talked about last episode, we talked pretty much about the Capcom belt-scrolling beat-em-up bundle and how much you're enjoying that. But like Capcom and Konami were basically head-to-head during that era, like in the arcades. So a lot of people think about Final Fight and stuff, but then right side by side with Final Fight and all Capcom's output, there was Konami with a lot of the classics that we associate with the genre, right? So the Turtles games, obviously, The Simpsons. The Simpsons is legendary, that beat-em-up game with the 4-player cabinet. Also the X-Men one.
Yeah. I'll tell you one they made that never gets talked about, but was my absolute favourite game for a long time. Literally, any time I walked into an arcade, it was there. I had to play it. And that was the Asterix arcade game.
Oh, yeah. See, that's not... Asterix is, like, non-existent in the US.
Yes, exactly. Because Asterix is such a European thing. It's very, very French. Yeah, but the arcade game for that was outstanding. It was so good. It had such good mechanics. It had these gorgeous big sprites that just captured the spirits of the comic absolutely perfectly. And yeah, that was one of my absolute favourite arcade games for the longest time.
Asterix games in general would make a really good topic to talk about. It's not something I could. It's not something I could speak about from any expertise, but legendarily, like Asterix games have a history of being quite good. There's actually HD remasters of previous ones, the PS2 series trilogy coming out very soon for the PS4, which I hope maybe makes its way to the US, because I'd be very interested to check them out. They're kind of legendarily nice. That's a little off topic though. So your kind of associations with classic Konami sound like they're fairly similar to mine. Just Castlevania, Gradius. Even going into the modern era, then opening things up to PS1, PS2. Do you have a favorite Konami game that kind of makes you think of them fondly?
If we're talking specifically about PS1 era, Symphony of the Night, definitely.
Sure.
I mean, I liked Metal Gear, but Symphony of the Night was just something that really, it pushed all my buttons in all the right ways. It had great music, it had lovely pixel art. It was a game that I actually sort of found myself having to kind of defend a bit at the time, because a lot of my friends were very much of the attitude that new consoles needed to use all the latest new technology as much as possible. So everything needed to be 3D, even if 3D was crap at the time. And so, yeah, I found myself having to kind of defend Symphony of the Night a bit, just because it was a 2D side-scroller that was sort of a genre that a lot of my friends had assumed had been left in the past with the 16-bit era. But I sat them down and said, look, no, play this. This is really good. And they were like, oh, yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But there was an initial amount of resistance to that kind of surprised me a bit. And I even felt a bit of it myself. I don't know how much of that was just down to sort of childish stupidity, or if any of that was actually influenced by things like the magazines at the time trying to push the latest technology and so on. But yeah, I recall picking that game up for the first time and thinking, should I be playing a game like this on the PlayStation? But yeah, it didn't take me long to get over that at all. Definitely one of my favourites.
That game is immortal. It's unbelievable. I mean, growing up, I didn't even really like Castlevania that much. Like as a kid, I kind of found them a bit too hard, and I didn't really enjoy them. I didn't really understand what Castlevania was trying to achieve, because the older Castlevanias, like specifically the 8-bit ones, they have a very distinct rigidity to them.
Yes.
Like your jump and your ability to not really control yourself during a jump, the very slow plodding pace of the character's movement. It's all designed in a very specific way. And as a kid, being a huge fan of like Mega Man and Mario, I was used to games with a more kinetic sense of movement. So I often found it hard to wrap my head around Castlevania when I was younger. So much of my life I grew up not caring for Castlevania, and then during the PS1 era I had a friend invite me over, and like he was playing Symphony of the Night, and I was like, what is this? I never experienced anything like this before, and they were like, oh well, this is the new Castlevania. And then at that point I was in my teens, and then it kind of forced me to retrospectively go back and rediscovered the series thanks to Symphony of the Night, and now it's pretty much my favorite franchise of all time.
Yeah,
and that's thanks to Symphony of the Night spurring me on to revisit what that series meant to me.
Yeah.
And now I'm one of those weirdos who just spends all night trying to like connect timelines, like figure out how all the games go together.
I will mention that Symphony of the Night was the beginning of a rather strange period in European releases of Konami games, or specifically Castlevania games, in that for several years and sort of halfway into the next generation of consoles, Konami just either forgot or just chose not to put any of the subtitles on Castlevania games. So they are all called Castlevania.
Oh, just Castlevania.
Yeah. So you buy Symphony of the Night on PlayStation, it's called Castlevania. You buy Castlevania 64, it's called Castlevania. You buy the Game Boy Advance one, whatever it's called, Circle of the Moon or whatever it was. It's called Castlevania. The first PS2 Castlevania game is just called Castlevania.
That's bizarre.
I have no idea why they did that. For the second PS2 game, they did actually start putting these subtitles back in, and for the later sort of DS versions, we started getting the subtitles again. But for a significant period of time, every single Castlevania game in Europe was called Castlevania.
That's really weird. I had no idea about that. Wow, that's funny. Yeah, so Castlevania, lovely. Contra, obviously lovely. Did you ever play the PS2 Contra games?
Again, recently, I actually picked up the PS2 one, Shattered Soldier, is it, I think?
Yeah, that's the first one. That's the side-scroller one.
Yes, yeah. So I picked that up recently and gave it a go, and got absolutely obliterated by it, but had a good time in the process.
It's a great game.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's really fun, but it's really difficult as well. But yeah, so I've really enjoyed that. I didn't play it back in the day, but I have discovered that one recently, much like sort of the rest of the Contra series. As I say, that's not one that I particularly grew up with, but it's one that I familiarized myself a bit with since, and I really like that PS2 one.
I quite recommend Contra 4 for the 3D and for the regular DS too, which is developed by WayForward.
Oh yes.
That's a great game. One of the reasons I, of course, love Konami is because I love Treasure. And for people who aren't super into Treasure history, Treasure, of course, was born from Konami. The story being that Treasure, the people who founded Treasure, were just tired of working for a bigger publisher and not being. They were tired of basically making sequels and retreads. Like they didn't want to make. They didn't want to make another Castlevania. They didn't want to make another Contra. They wanted to make weird shit. So many of the older Konami games that we love were worked on by people who became Treasure. So you can kind of run a through line through some of Konami's best output in those early days and make a direct connection from those games to things like Gunstar Heroes.
Okay.
Rocket Knight Adventures is one of my all-time favorite side-scrollers for the Genesis / Mega Drive. That's a great one. Some of Konami's licensed work was quite good. Some of the side-scrollers they did based on Warner Brothers' Tiny Toon Adventures.
Oh, yes. I remember those.
Those were all worked on people who would become Treasure. It's great stuff. Gradius, obviously defined, difficult side-scrolling shooters right alongside R-Type for many years, and they also helped define the Q-'em-up genre with the Proteus series. All wonderful stuff. Konami now owns Hudson, but they've always been kind of close. One of the games I always joke about with people is, everyone's super excited, me included, about Simon Belmont and Richter Belmont being in the new Smash Brothers. Back in the PS2 and GameCube era, there was actually a Smash Brothers style arena fighter called Dream Mix TV Fighters, and it had Castlevania. It had Simon Belmont in it.
Oh wow!
And it was Dream Mix TV Fighters, and it was Takara, the toy company, Hudson, and Konami.
Oh wow!
So it was possible to have a Smash Brothers style match between Simon Belmont, Bomberman, the werewolf from Bloody Roar, and Optimus Prime.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, Konami has done some really weird, experimental, and fun stuff throughout their history. Most of my deepest associations with their work are with the Mega Drive specifically. Things like, as I mentioned, Rocket Knight Adventures. I believe Contra Hardcore on the Genesis is the best Contra game, because it's also kind of the goofy, tongue-in-cheek one, where like everything's... Like, I know it's hard to say, like... It's the Contra where everything's insane, because like Contra is insane, but like Contra Hardcore is the one that's a little goofier, because you can be a werewolf with a Gatling gun for an arm.
Nice.
Goemon is a beautiful franchise that has...
Oh, yeah, that was them, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's one of those series that I love, but I always forget who was behind it.
Yeah, total classic Konami. Which one did you play those back in the day?
I play. My first contact with it was actually emulating the Super NES version.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But this was sort of back in like late 90s, early 2000s, and so on. And then I went out and bought the N64 version.
That was my initial exposure to the series. Was the N64 ones.
The N64 one is such a fun game. I mean, it is a game that shows the importance of localization, because it has so many jokes that don't land because they didn't localize them properly. So there'll be a bit of dialogue, and then there'll be some canned laughter at it, and you're like, what are they laughing at? That it wasn't funny. But yeah, that game was worth playing just for its characters, and it played really well. It had great music, and the songs. So
Goemon, for the non-history buffs, is in the West Mystical Ninja. Were they Goemon for you guys in the UK? Or were they Mystical Ninja?
I think they were Mystical Ninja starring Goemon over here. I don't know if it was the same for you, but yeah.
Yeah. So those also classic Konami. So I mean, they've had their hands in so much over the years. So I mean, that's why I think people get so depressed about modern Konami, is because they were a fun experimental house making really all kinds of different stuff for a very, very long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we start looking a little bit further forward into like the PS2 era and so on, if you start looking at what they were doing with things like Metal Gear and Silent Hill as well, those are, I mean, they're sort of less regarded as particularly weird these days. But like Metal Gear 2, for example, that was a ballsy move at the time, the way they handled that.
Oh yeah.
Just because of things like everyone was expecting a whole sequel with Solid Snake. They went so far as releasing a demo where you were playing as Solid Snake, and it turns out that was just the first bit of the game. The rest of the game you were playing as this complete other dude. That was incredibly ballsy at the time, considering how well established Solid Snake was as a character at that point. And then we had Silent Hill 2 in particular, which was really a very early example of people coming to understand that it was possible for games to tackle mature themes in a way that wasn't explicit.
That really was a landmark game, Silent Hill 2, in a lot of ways.
So it was probably one of the first examples of a game I remember reading some writing about it, that where people were actually analysing it and picking it apart as if it was something from a more established medium. So they're picking
like
it apart
a film,
like a movie or a book or so on. Yeah, absolutely. So they were exploring the themes of it, what things might be representing in it, and that was I read that and that was like, yeah, this is remarkable. This is a really special game. And Silent Hill 2 I have very fond memories of, just because I enjoyed the first one a great deal and played it a lot on the PS1. Silent Hill 2, my first contact with it was when I was at university, and some friends from back where I used to live came to visit, and one of them brought his copy of Silent Hill 2 with him. I hadn't picked it up yet because I was waiting for like student loan money or something like that to be able to pick it up myself. But he came along. He brought Silent Hill 2 with him. We were going to have an evening of eating curry, getting drunk, and playing Silent Hill 2. What actually ended up happening is he got so drunk he passed out in the chair in the corner of the room, and I played all of the way through Silent Hill 2 in one night. And he sort of woke up as the credits were rolling. He was like, "What happened?"
It's like, I'm not going to recap the entire game. Go back to sleep.
But yeah, that game was just so compelling to me at the time that I just had to play it through all in one go, and it's a game that has stuck with me ever since. It's one of the few games that I regularly go back and replay for various reasons, just because it is special to me. I know we've got sort of loose plans to maybe have a sort of vaguely horror themed episode towards the end of the month, so I won't say too much more about that now. But yeah, Silent Hill 2 has always been a game that's been really special to me, and yeah, obviously that's a big part of my feelings for Konami.
Yeah, oh absolutely. I remember when the PS2 was in its heyday, I was working at a small independently owned game shop nearby, and we were lucky enough to have another employee working at the shop who was Japanese. His name was Jim, and he was like a first generation Japanese immigrant, was like fluent, and he played mostly imports. Like he imported games. And I just remember Jim getting his import copy of Silent Hill 2, and just all of us, like Jim and like the three other guys who worked at that shop, being just like super transfixed by like not having ever really seen anything like this before. And like like the radio and just the game in general, just being so Suikoden. I don't know. Are you a Suikoden fan?
I have no familiarity with Suikoden whatsoever. It is a series that I didn't even become aware of until relatively recently, probably sort of the last 5 or 10 years or so. I had no contact with it in sort of the PS1 and PS2 eras. It is one of the series that it did have some installments actually came out over here. It's just one that I never had any contact with for one reason or another. So I know nothing about it.
Me neither. It never really landed with me. I own a couple of them, and I've played them kind of for 10 or 12 hours, and it's never a series that really sunk with me. But I just know that the fan base is rabid. Like people are really passionate about that series.
Yeah.
My only real love of Suikoden is the opening cinematic of Suikoden 3. If you've never seen this or heard the music, I highly recommend checking it out because it's absolutely beautiful. This was also during the time when I worked at that game shop, and we used to have a theory that just like we used to just say like putting Suikoden 3 on like loop all day was like good luck, and we would put Suikoden 3 and let that demo loop run of that opening cinematic, and I would sell like 5 or 6 copies of that a night just based on like the beauty of that opening cinematic. So yes, Suikoden, particularly on the PS2, Konami was a really interesting company to follow. I really love that game that Koji Igarashi made that wasn't Castlevania, Nano Breaker.
Oh yeah, yep.
A lot of people either hated that or just forget that it exists, but it was just a really cool 3D action platformer with really neat combo mechanics. You know, that's not really something you get these days.
Yeah,
is just a off the wall new 3D action game, not a franchise, not anything serious. Just this is an idea for next week, and then it gets made.
Yeah.
And it's fun and it's cool, and you never hear from it again, but it's a cool game to have in your collection to revisit.
I tell you what else from the PS2 era that I always forget is done by Konami, which is actually the first game I bought on the PS2, which is Shadow of Memories.
Oh yeah.
That is another game that is very special to me. It's one of the few games I think I've actually still got my original copy of that I bought back in the day. But it was the first game I bought on the PS2. I mentioned back on the Nintendo DS episode that one of the things I liked to do with new consoles from probably the PS2 era onwards is pick a game that no one was talking about and have that as my first game for it. And in the case of the PS2, that game was Shadow of Memories, which for the unfamiliar it's basically an adventure game. So it's not survival horror, it's not an action game, it is a straight up adventure game. So you play the role of this guy called Ike, who lives in a German town, and he keeps getting murdered in each chapter, and the aim of each chapter is to use this time traveling device that you get provided by this thing called Homunculus that is voiced by Charles Martinet of all people. You have to travel through time and basically stop your own murder. And the ways you do this become increasingly elaborate as the game goes through. So in sort of the first chapter, you're just sort of going back a few minutes and stopping someone being in the place they were going to be when they were going to kill you. But as you progress through the game, you start moving through several different time periods. So going right back into sort of the medieval time. And sort of affecting things that were happening back there. And then there's this whole complicated meta plot to do with like the Philosopher's Stone and stuff like that. So it was a really fascinating game at the time, and it was I was just sort of getting really interested in the potential of games to tell stories at the time. So I was coming off the back of the early Final Fantasy games and very plot heavy JRPGs in the PS1 era, and I was sort of on a real high for narrative based games at the time the PS2 came along. And for a game to come out that was essentially nothing but narrative at the time was really, really fascinating to me, and it's a game I still enjoy today. Obviously, if you're the kind of person who enjoys a bit more in the way of sort of gameplay and sort of actual direct interaction with the world and combat and that sort of thing, it's not something you will necessarily enjoy. But if you like the sort of traditional Japanese adventure game experience, then yeah, it's very well worth having a look at. And like I say, it's one of my favourite PS2 games.
Yeah, that's a really neat game, actually. There's a bit of a following for that too. There was a re-release of it recently on one of the handheld platforms. I can't remember.
They did a PSP version.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
In 2010, from the look of things.
I guess that's not recently then.
It's 8 years ago now, you know.
Jesus.
Like I say, I booted up Fatal Frame Project Zero the other day, and it said copyright 2001. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, one of my first PS2 games was a Konami game too. When I bought my PS2, I got three games. I got Mobile Suit Gundam Journey to Jabrow, because like holy crap, a Gundam game on new platform with new graphics, I had to get it. Armored Core 2.
Yep.
So giant robots again. And the PS2, on the PS2, Konami had released Gradius 3 and 4. Like it was a compilation disc of a 3D remake of Gradius 3 and then Gradius 4 together on one disc, and it was early PS2, right? So this wasn't even a DVD game. It was one of the blue bottom CD based games. But yeah, so one of my first PS2 games was as well a Konami game.
I'm sorry I called
There you go. It's infiltrated our gaming life ever since the beginning, from the look of things, even without us knowing in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I don't have too much else, just kind of wanted to have a little discussion about, historically how Konami has tied into our identity in terms of what consoles we've enjoyed their games on and kind of what we associate them with.
Yeah, definitely. And I think an important thing to highlight is that although, people don't think a lot of Konami these days for all sorts of reasons, it doesn't stop any of their back catalogue being any less noteworthy and that kind of thing. So
yeah.
These games will always be special regardless of what the company might have become these days. So
yeah, very important to remember. But like I said, they've been weird in like the past couple months, and like who knows what's going on there, because I've even found the existence of Bomberman.
Yeah.
I mean, the new Bomberman isn't great. Like, let's throw that out there. It's kind of clunky. It's not great. But just the fact that, like, when the Switch came out, it was like, hey, when the Switch launches, let's go into our Hudson properties that we own. Like, let's make sure there's a proper Bomberman. And over the years, now they've released that on the PS4 now, also available, and they've done a really cool job of supporting it with updates, new characters. Many of those new characters are history tribute characters. So, like, they've added a Vic Viper bomber, harkening back to Gradius. Simon Belmont bomber and an Alucard bomber, like Castlevania characters. I think Pyramid Head. There's a Pyramid Head bomber from Silent Hill. So, like, someone in Konami gets it.
Yeah, and I mean, in Japan, there's the Bomber Girl arcade game as well, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, that looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that came out. I thought that had been out for a lot longer than it has, but it only came out at the end of August from the look of things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was under the impression that had been out for a while, but yeah. Hopefully we'll see something to do with that at some point, because that does look like a lot of fun. But yeah, they're obviously still doing things with some of these franchises. It just seems less than them being a bad company at the moment. I think they just seem to be having a bit of an identity crisis and sort of not really knowing what to do with how gaming is these days. And that's sort of understandable because gaming in 2018 is such a broad thing now with your mobile games at one end of things and sort of high-end PC games at the other and console games in that middle ground and handheld games and TV connected games and online games and all sorts. There's just so many different directions a company like that can go in. It's, in a way, I kind of don't blame them for being a bit confused as to what to do with some of these properties.
It's very difficult. My buddies and I keep talking about. I don't think Capcom realizes what it's done with Mega Man 11. In a lot of ways, I think Mega Man 11 might be a linchpin for how these companies treat their classic characters. And if Mega Man 11 is very successful, it might send a message. You can kind of feel Capcom dipping their toes in this now with the Mega Man Legacy collections and the X collections, and now 11, a brand new Mega Man. And there's been rumblings that a new X might happen if 11 is successful. And my friends and I keep saying, well, with the way Konami's been dipping back into these historical updates for Bomberman, this Pixel Puzzle collection, now the Castlevania, it feels a little bit like what Capcom just did with the Mega Man collections. So if stuff like Mega Man 11 proves to be successful, any of these large publishers, all they need is for someone to come with a proposal that proves it's going to make money.
Yeah.
All it takes is for something like Mega Man 11 to be successful for some 30-something, you and I's age, who works in Konami, to put a proposal together and say, hey, look, Capcom sold a couple million copies of this. The Western market ate this up. Give me a $500,000 budget. Let's make a new 2.5D Castlevania and put it up on the PlayStation Network. Like, that's really all it takes, is for the proof to be that the money is there and the audience is there. Oh, Castlevania just reminded me. Can I just mention how much I love the Castlevania game that everyone hates that isn't Lords of Shadow, which is the Time Attack arcade style one on XBLA and PSN? Oh, that game is really cool.
I fucking love that game so much. But I can never remember what it's called. It's either Harmony of Dissonance or Harmony of Despair.
It's Harmony of Dissonance, I think.
Because one of those is a DS game and the other one is the game I'm talking about. Let me look it up. But yeah, I really, really love that game, and it's one that the people who love that game, they really love it, but then a lot of people at the time were like, ooh, this isn't Castlevania, I don't like it very much. But yeah,
I didn't like it because of how it kind of had some too much microtransactions for my liking, but like mechanically it was a really unique idea. Like I was behind it 100%.
It would have been nice to have a complete package of that at some point, which is, as far as I know, never happened. It's Harmony of Despair, by the way, not Harmony of Dissonance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have a complete package because, the way it was sold, you had, I think, 5 levels built into it, and then there was like another 5 or 6 levels you could buy as DLC, and then there were characters you could buy for it. I mean, to be fair, it did often go on sale, so you could get like each of those things for like 20p in some cases, but it would still be nice to have a complete package of that at some point. I would love to see a re-release of it, to be honest, on modern platforms and get some people playing multiplayer again.
Give me a PS4 physical disc with everything. I would buy that immediately, and I would pay for PS Plus to be able to play that with you.
Yeah, I was going to say I only played it multiplayer a couple of times, but it was great fun. Really good fun.
It's got a gear loop too, right? Like there's very much like a collecting items, like collecting gear and weapons. Like it's the kind of thing I could really sink my teeth into if I could find people to reliably play it with.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to bring that up.
That's a really cool game. No, I'm glad you did. I forget that exists all the time.
I think this is an interesting thing about Konami, though, because like when you mentioned talking about Konami, I was just like, oh, do I know anything by Konami? But like, just as we've been having this discussion, I've just been thinking, oh yeah, I really like that game, and that's Konami as well, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Bizarre. Why don't I remember any of this stuff until we sort of actively have a discussion about it?
It's amazing how that happens. People forget about their presence in the music games.
Yes.
I mean, let's not forget that. Guitar Hero is conceptually based on Konami's Guitar Freaks. Mm-hmm. Like, Konami invented the plastic instruments genre.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire Bimani series, Dance Dance Revolution, Beatmania, and Poppin' Music. Yeah. This is all Konami.
By the way, don't ever play the Wii version of Poppin' Music. It is fucking awful.
Is it? No, listen. Where I come from, RE Poppin' Music is like the hardest of the hardcore. Like I knew a guy who had like his own custom home-built arcade cabinet, full-sized Poppin' Music controller. Yeah. Like I don't know if you've ever seen that. Like
I've seen the lengths that people go to for that. Let me tell you probably the Wii version. So Poppin' Music is sort of based on sort of having those lovely big buttons and stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, imagine, if you will, imagine that experience without the buttons.
You've already lost me.
Imagine that experience where instead of pressing the button, you have to wave either the Wii Remote or the nunchuck in a particular direction. And this was pre-Motion Plus era, so it doesn't register your directions very well. That is why Poppin' Music for the Wii is very, very bad indeed. However, if you get a chance to play the Game Boy versions, those are amazing.
Are they really?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them, and they're really, really cool. So, yeah, be sure to check them out. There's like a Disney-themed one, and there's this one with just sort of these really cool chip tunes in it. So, yeah, if you have a chance to either dig those out or emulate them, then give them a look. They're surprisingly good.
Now, are they for the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color? Like old? Not Game Boy Advance?
Game Boy Color, I think. I'm just taking a look through my library now. I'm pretty sure they're Game Boy Color.
See, that's cool. I didn't know. But yeah, so... Once again, like the more you think about it, the more something Konami had its hands in will pop up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, Game Boy Color they are. There's 3 from the look of things.
Even I think old school dating sims. I think they were like legendarily. I think the old Tokimeki Memorials were.
Yes, they were
Konami.
Jesus, what is going on?
Right? Because Tokimeki Memorial is one of like the quintessential. Like early dating sims. Establish the notion of like dating sims also with like gamic elements, like the girlfriend raising dating sim where like stats were involved.
Yes,
and that was Konami.
Yep. Yeah, that dates right back to PC Engine.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. See, worth talking about. Good old Konami. All right. Well, I don't have too much else. How about you?
I think we've covered a good amount of ground there, and I'm just sort of left a bit reeling from
the revelation.
Yeah, from just how much stuff out there that I've always been interested in, or I've always really enjoyed playing, is actually Konami stuff, perhaps without me even realizing in some cases. So there you go. There's a lesson for you all there. Fuck Konami, am I right?
Yeah, right? Boo. No. Like, seriously. Yeah. Perhaps if we continue to be nice to them. Like...
Nice? On the internet in 2018?
Shh. It's all gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. We live in a world where I just bought a new Mega Man game. Can we please just talk about the fact that we live in a world where I just bought a new Mega Man game?
Mm-hmm. It's pretty special.
I'm emboldened with the idea that anything can happen right now.
Yep.
So I choose hope.
Well, I think that's probably a good note to end this podcast, so I'll leave everybody feeling happy and good about it.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up in our usual way. Chris, do you want to tell people where to find you online and commission you and pay you money to do lovely artwork?
I do like getting money to do lovely artwork. All my artwork can be found on MrGilderPixels.com, MrGilderPixels. Also, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram as Mr. Gilder Pixels. I also recently have launched a Facebook page, which is Mr. Gilder Pixels page, so you can also follow me and comment on there. I am currently working on a Bowsette piece, which I'm quite happy with how it's turning out. Yeah. So by the time I finish it, no one will actually remember what Bowsette is, because it takes me forever, but it is turning out well, and I'm sharing work in progress as I'm doing it, so I would love to hear from everybody while I'm doing that.
It's got a fine pair of boobies. Everyone's going to love it regardless if they remember Bowsette or not.
Listen, I've been drawing for a very long time, and these are by far the finest breasts I've ever drawn. I'm quite happy about it.
Good work. Right. As always, you can find me on MoeGamer.net, writing about Japanese games, visual novels, retro games, and all sorts of other stuff. Elsewhere on YouTube, you can find my Atari A to Z series that I've mentioned previously, covering both the Atari 8-bit and Atari ST. You can also find an archive of all those videos and some other bits and pieces on AtariAtoZ.wordpress.com. And you can find my write-ups on Philips G7000 Video Pack games, Magnavox Odyssey 2 games to you people in the States, over on videopackgames.wordpress.com.
Now you have to make that website.
Video Pack Games.
I'll do like Gaijinka versions of like all the different Video Pack.
You know, there's a disappointing lack of female representation in Video Pack games from 1978, don't you know?
Like, I'll make, like, Casey Munchkin-chan.
Don't. I'll like it too much and then I'll feel bad. Anyway, let's leave that there.
Pickaxe Pete-chan. Come on. With a little miner hat on.
Someone's probably done it somewhere already.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyway, thank you very much for listening and or watching, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buying me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.